This will definitely be the most shocking thing you hear today, that the FBI had been researching and using mind-controlled Manchurian candidates in 1936, and I can prove it with their own documents. So let's jump into this nightmare fuel and see if you can sleep tonight. The story all starts with Dr. George Estabrooks, who was a Canadian-American psychologist and expert on hypnosis. And while doing some other research, I just happened to luck upon Dr. Estabrooks' Freedom of Information Act file from the FBI that contains these shocking documents. This document from October 29, 1936, on the FBI's own letterhead, talks about a visit with Dr. Estabrooks at Colgate University in upstate New York. It describes a visit by FBI agent E.P. Coffey, where they discussed with Dr. Estabrooks the possibilities of some of the principles of hypnotism being applied to interrogation. And I'd like everybody to know that E.P. Coffey wasn't just some low-level FBI guy or intern. He wasn't Timmy the coffee gopher. He was the head of the FBI's technical laboratory in Washington, D.C., and quite a scientist himself. And he was in every way qualified to examine and analyze the claims of Estabrooks about his hypnotic techniques. The document states that discussions in this respect might well be divided into two parts, namely, those involving the contemplated work using drugs and perhaps hypnotism combined with drugs by Dr. Estabrooks and several Syracuse physicians in a research experiment, and the advisability of having the FBI trained on the principles of hypnotism by Dr. Estabrooks. Now, Estabrooks had gone back and forth with the FBI about this for quite some time, and I have a whole paper trail going back significantly earlier than this, including correspondence directly with J Edgar Hoover. But even so, Coffey, true to government worker form, reverted to his earlier reptilian state of cover your ass. In this document, you can see very clearly that Coffey tells Estabrooks that the FBI can't really be associated with this. This is horrible for our public image, and we need to do things so that the public doesn't realize that we're doing this kind of testing, but we still want to move forward. So Estabrooks agrees, and they try to work out how they could clandestinely push this forward. I know people like to pull the term conspiracy theorist out of their behind when they don't want to believe something, but when you sit and read a document like this that literally has people laying out a conspiracy between them to do something they're not supposed to do, like, come on, what a bunch of weasels. So Estabrooks was meeting with Coffey to prove what he could do with hypnosis that could be beneficial for the FBI and to make his ultimate proposition. And what was that? Well, the document states very clearly that Dr. Estabrooks countered with an ultimate proposition, suggesting that he arranged for the transfer of several unusually good hypnotic subjects to Washington, D.C. or the vicinity. After these people had been located in Washington, he indicated that he would come to Washington, preferably during one of the holiday periods, such as the Christmas holidays, and devote a week or 2 weeks if necessary to teaching the principles of hypnotism to anyone the Bureau might designate, and that they would utilize for this practice those unusually good subjects. He then pointed out that after this initial instruction, the Bureau's representative could continue the practice with these subjects and obtain increased skill through continued practice, and intimated that these subjects might be found useful to the Bureau for other purposes, such as informers. That by using the principles of post-hypnotic suggestion, these hypnotic subjects could be in hypnosis and be given instructions for the gathering of criminal information, and that following their release from this hypnotic state, they would have no conscious memory whatsoever of the instructions they were given or of following those hypnotic suggestions. What Estabrooks was proposing is sending 3 people to the FBI that would be hypnotized by him and then passed off to the FBI to be used and implanted into criminal organizations as informers, and that these people would have 2 different personalities, one that would infiltrate and gather information, and the second would be their normal personality, and that these 2 personalities didn't know that the other existed. The information given by one would not be remembered by the other, and the activities of one would not be remembered by the other. The perfect cover. As I said earlier, Estabrooks had gone back and forth with J Edgar Hoover and officials at the FBI about this, and he had already found these 3 subjects. Estabrooks was going to the Civilian Conservation Corps' camp nearby. The Civilian Conservation Corps was a make-work project during the Depression where young men could go off and instead of being unemployed, they would be given room and board and they would build roads, they would build national park facilities and things like that. And Estabrooks was going to these camps and hypnotizing people to find people who could act as spies and Manchurian candidates. Two of these subjects were from the Conservation Corps camp near Utica, New York, and the third is the wife of a former student, now deceased, of Dr. Estabrooks. All three are conditioned subjects of his, and he demonstrated the hypnotic possibilities of two of them, namely the CCC boys, before Agent Coffey from the FBI. Coffey states that he visited this CCC camp number S-103 at De Ruyter, New York, and met these two subjects, and that with hardly more than a snap of the fingers, Estabrooks was able to successfully induce hypnosis in these subjects and put them through various interesting demonstrations, following which they had complete amnesia as to the events which had transpired. Estabrooks was demonstrating MK-Ultra Manchurian candidates with altered personalities in 1936 to a representative from the FBI, and they were very interested in learning and bringing that into the organization. Now, before any of the fake Reddit science wannabes get up in my business about this can't possibly be real, it is. The hilarious part about this is that Estabrooks' demonstrations for Agent Coffey worked just fine. Coffey was very satisfied with those demonstrations and that Estabrooks had a real technique to create Manchurian candidates. Nowhere in any of this or any of the communications with Estabrooks does anybody raise any qualms about this can't possibly be real. This cannot be scientifically accurate. You are wearing the tinfoiliest of hats, my dear man. You are clearly a conspiracy theorist of the worst and most reprehensible kind. How dare you sully my presence with your simple-mindedness? Never. They know it's real. They know the Manchurian candidate part of this, the mind control part of this, they know actually works, and they don't question it. It's just how to put it into practical application. So, suck it! The only thing that Coffey raised as a counter-argument is that he didn't know how they would take those three people, the woman and the two guys, and get them involved in any criminal organizations to act as informants. Nowhere does Coffey say that he thinks it's wrong, that it's morally reprehensible, that it's anti-American to control people's minds. He just doesn't see the practicality of it. And right there says everything you need to know about the FBI's mentality around things like January 6th. As I said, I have a paper trail of documents before and after this specific report that prove that Estabrooks was involved with the FBI for decades. It's unclear to me if the FBI ever took in any of the subjects that Estabrooks had prepared. But Estabrooks most definitely went to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. to train their personnel and had an ongoing training relationship with the Assistant Director of the FBI, Mr. Quinn Tam. Agent Tam was designated by J Edgar Hoover himself to go to New York on an ongoing basis to study with Estabrooks and to learn these very specific hypnotic techniques to break a personality into multiple alters that could be used for spying. Now, this was not low-level information within the FBI. This was director level and above. This is secret project territory. So, for example, whatever FBI agent is out there that's assigned to me watching this video or my social media, you probably think this is quite preposterous, but their boss's boss's boss knows that it's real, and they know that there are operational agents that have this done to them that are out there in the world right now. I'd also like to say sorry not sorry, because my For You page on TikTok is like 90% big titty goth girls and 10% painting Warhammer miniatures, and either you're into that kind of thing or you're not. So I don't know how it got that way. Maybe it's just a Chinese spy thing. And the story doesn't stop there with Estabrooks, because he was involved with other organizations such as the military. And in this 1971 article from Science Digest, he states very openly and clearly, almost boasting, that he created mind-controlled Manchurian candidates for the Marines during World War II. The ongoing discussion between the FBI and Estabrooks included topics like hypnosis for interrogation, the use of drugs and truth serums in combination with hypnosis, and even psychic ability to be used for spying. We've come to associate these techniques with remote viewing and psychokinesis, the ability to stop a heart or to influence somebody's mind with directed thought. But we've been propagandized to think that this started with places like Stanford Research Institute, when in fact it started much, much earlier with other organizations. We have been ridiculously propagandized with several layers of horseshit and fake conspiracy stories behind all this to capture you when you start looking too deep into this topic. On one hand, you've got the official Fed story that, oh, they started the Stanford research experiments and MK Ultra and all this stuff because we needed to catch up with the Soviets, we needed to catch up with the Russians. Even though that's clearly not true, we had been doing it decades before that. The Russians were trying to catch up with us, the British and the French. And the second bullshit story is that, oh, this all started with World War II with Operation Paperclip, and it must be those horrible bad Nazis that we brought over, and they started all the MK Ultra stuff up. That's not true either. It's very clearly Americans started all this and were using it within American organizations long before the war. And what both of these stories do is they divert you. They act as honeypots. If you get interested in this topic and you go digging, you're going to pull you off onto one side or the other, and you're not going to go down the actual path of knowing how old this technology is, where the technology actually came from, or how long it's actually been operational. No, we were the bad guys the whole time. If the FBI was using this back in the 1930s to mind control Americans, to use against Americans, how un-American is that? This has been real and in play with people out there that have been taken from homeless shelters and mental institutions and civilian conservation corps camps and different hospitals and programmed and put out into the public for 100 years and maybe longer. The techniques that Estabrooks was using were not difficult. They weren't super technological. You didn't need like specialized equipment to do it. It was all just hypnotic techniques. So who knows how long this has been going on? Centuries? Millennia? With this new evidence, we now need to face the fact that it didn't start in the 1950s and 60s and 70s with MK Ultra and the CIA, that it goes back far longer than that, and that we have no idea how much of our actual society is part of this. We have no idea if the people we see on TV, if our celebrities, our politicians, have some kind of control going on under the hood. And we have no idea how much of our civilization right now, the bad things that we see out there, are actually being controlled in some way. I feel like Morpheus. All I can do is offer you the red pill and the truth. And this is the truth. And I realize that it's terrifying to try to wrap your mind around the weight of this, but I appreciate you being courageous enough to stick through with me. So I hope I blew your mind with this today, because it sure shocked me when I found it. And if you're interested in any of the other information that I've uncovered, I'm happy to do more videos about it. Jump in the comments and let me know what you'd like to see. And if you'd like to read these papers for yourself, you can find them on our blog on the Museum of Tarot website at www.museumoftarot.com. I have a lot more hidden and forgotten information just like this to share with you. So jump on our website and join our mailing list, and we'll let you know when our new videos drop. Until then, thanks for watching.